I'm spending the next 6 months becoming a fantasy expert, and here's my plan. Now, before everything and anything, why am I doing this? Why am I challenging myself to learn fantasy in 6 months? Well, as you all know, I love fantasy. Fantasy is my favorite genre. Fantasy is just that one genre that I just fell in love with reading, that made me fall in love with reading. So, of course, I want to learn more about it. Like, why not? What harm could it do for me to know more about the fantasy genre? I want to know how it works. I want to know how it became, how everything just turned out the way that it did. Why do we have all of these tropes? Where did they come from? I just want to know everything about fantasy. And if I do ever want to write my book, because I do really want to write a book, okay, of course, we all do. Most readers do want to write books, and I'm one of them. So I thought that there would be no harm in learning fantasy, because if I know a lot about fantasy, and I know a lot about this topic, how it's written, how it works, what type of tropes do we have, how do they function, that would make me a better writer. I think it would really help with my writing journey, understanding how patterns work, what patterns exist in the fantasy genre. So that's why I decided, you know what, let's become a fantasy expert in 6 months. If I'm going to do it or not, I don't know. Let's see. I'm going to obviously document this journey because I need to keep myself accountable in some sort of way, and this is the way that I found to keep myself accountable. And now, how am I going to become an expert in 6 months? What do I need to do? And I've already curated a plan. So this is going to take, like I said, obviously 6 months. That is literally the name of the challenge. I don't know why I felt the need to explain that to you. It was a little bit redundant. Anyways, so in the first month, I am planning to learn the basics of fantasy. So how do I even study fantasy? How do I even study books? Because if you don't know, I have a law degree. I do not have a literature degree. I do not even know how to begin reading books like a professor, or reading books like I'm in, a dark academia college. I don't know how to do any of that. So first and foremost, I think it's very, very important for me to have the basics on that. So in this first month, in these 4 weeks of May, I think there are 4 weeks, I don't know. Anyways, so in this month of May, everything and anything that I'm going to do is going to be related to how to even read books. What am I supposed to be looking for? What type of patterns? What can I see? What is the symbolism, metaphors? Just everything that encapsulates how to read like a professor, like I'm analyzing a text. That is something that I need to know, because if I do not know how to do any of that basics, I'm just not going to be able to analyze a fantasy book, because first and foremost, obviously, a fantasy book is a book first. And even though I'm not going to be learning how to specifically, this first month, how to specifically analyze a fantasy book, I think it's important for me to analyze any book whatsoever, and from what I've been reading, because I've started a little bit, there are some patterns that also that not only appear in fantasy, they also appear in other books, like contemporary literature, for example. So that is quite funny. So in this first week, and I'll be giving you guys an update every single week. So for this first week, I'll be reading a book called How to Read Literature Like a Professor by Thomas, I don't know, I forgot his name, okay? But it's going to be here in the screen. And I'm going to read the first 10 chapters, because it's in these first 10 chapters that he explains a lot of patterns that we see in literature, that we see in the books that we read. For example, the first one is all about, there's always a quest. Just like in fantasy. In fantasy, we see it a lot of times. There's always a quest, some sort of mission that our character has to go through, because that involves personal growth, personal development, character development. It's an arc. And that not only shows up in fantasy, but it also shows up in multiple other books, as he explains. So that is what I'm going to be doing this week. Now, going back to the overall plan, so the first month, like I said, I'm going to be trying to learn how to read literature in the most basic way, what I should be looking for, what I should be seeing, all those kind of things. And then afterwards, in the next 2 months, I'm going to be reading some fantasy books and trying to analyze them, learning and using the tools that I've learned in this first month. So if everything goes according to plan, in June and July, that is what I'm going to be doing. In fact, in June, I might have to I do have an annotation system, and I do have a key, but I might have to update it. I don't know if I have to or not, because I have 5 elements that I analyze, which is world building, story, characters, quotes, moments, themes, anything, and then theories. So I do have these 5 elements that I always analyze, that I always use in fantasy books, but I don't know if I'm still going to be using it, because what what I'm learning now in this month of May, it might change that annotation system. I don't know. So if it does change, then I have to create an annotation system. And like I said, in June and July, I'll be reading fantasy books. I think I'm going to start with The Magician by Raymond D. Feist because I read it in 2019 and I really wanted to reread it this year. So I think I'm going to pick that book up and trying to analyze it and see common themes and character developments and character arcs, world building, just everything. And I'm going to be trying to analyze those 3 books. I think that's kind of enough in June and July. I don't know if I'm going to be able to read the 3 books in those 2 months, but that's definitely what I'm going to be doing in the next 2 months, or the second phase of my experiment on how to learn fantasy in 6 months. And then afterwards, after those 2 months, I think I'm going to be focusing on every element of fantasy. So for example, world building, characters, stories, tropes, just everything that makes up a story essentially. And I'm just really going to analyze it in the fantasy perspective. So I'm expecting to read, obviously continue analyzing a lot of the books that I'm reading. But not only that, I really want to also read articles from other people, from other authors, and see their insights and their opinions on the fantasy genre, how to write it, how to analyze it, just all of those things. So I think it's August and September. Exactly, August and September, I'm going to be focusing on this 3rd phase of just continuously learning how to obviously analyze fantasy, reading fantasy books, which it's not hard for me. I love fantasy, okay? I always read fantasy books, but analyze them. I'm not going to analyze them deeply because there are a lot of books. So I'm not going to analyze every single book that I read, but I'm always going to try and do a little overview just to practice on how to find those themes, characters, all that kind of stuff. That's what I want to do, but I also really want to start reading magazines and articles and trying to see any different opinions, different facts, insights, just everything, really just trying to keep up with fantasy, basically. That's what I'm doing. Like any other scholar, we have to keep up with the times, we have to keep up with every single opinion. And lastly, for October, that is the last month of this challenge. In October, I really want to start writing my own essays. Exactly. Yes. I'm going to be writing my own essays. I'm going to be writing essays in every single theme imaginable. For example, I love the Mistborn trilogy. I can find plenty of themes to write about from that book, or just any book in general. I really want to start writing my own essays, my own thoughts, my own opinions, and see if I can have anything published. That would be a go-to move.
She's got a point. She's an icon. She's a legend, and she is the moment. Now, come on now.
That would be actually a go-to move to have anything published this year, but I'm going to put here my plan. So basically, this is my 6-month plan. I'm going to start by learning the basics of literature, how to read literature like a professor, how to read literature like any other scholar. And then the next 2 months, I'm going to be analyzing The Magician by Raymond D. Feist, trying to put everything that I learned in the first month into practice. The next 2 months, I'm going to be continuing to analyze all the books that I'm reading, but just in a very, basic way, just very simple. I don't want to deep dive like The Magician. I just want to maintain the practice of what I learned. And then in the last month, what I want to do is just really write my own essays, just read continuous articles and all that kind of stuff. That is really what I'm going to do. So with this plan set, now all we have to do is start, which I'm so freaking excited. Like, you have no idea. I'm just so freaking excited for this challenge. I don't know. I just really want to be a scholar, Obviously, in this 6 months, I'm not going to stop. Okay, so what I mean is, in these 6 months, it's going to be very intense. I'm going to try and really learn as much as I can about fantasy, about books. That's what I want to do. But if you want to learn anything, you have to continue studying. So I'm never going to stop. But these 6 months are just going to be very, very intensive. Obviously, after the 6 months mark, I'm going to continue putting into practice everything that I've learned, continue reading articles, magazines, anything that shows up my way. You have to do that too. So if you want to follow my plan, you can obviously follow my plan. Let's do this together. I think it's going to be so freaking fun. And I'm going to feel like a scholar, okay? The books that we read, I'm going to be like a scholar, like a dark academia. I'm going to be intelligent and smart up here. At least that's the goal anyways. So that's what I want to have to do. So we have the plan, and now all we have to do is to start. So let's get started. And let me just say, I'm having so much fun. I never thought it would be this fun to learn fantasy, which is kind of weird because, like I said, fantasy is literally my preferred genre. I love fantasy with my whole freaking heart and soul. So I don't know why I'm so surprised that I would be loving to learn how to read books and how to analyze books, because that's what I'm doing first. So to just recap a little bit, I am trying to learn how to analyze books. I'm not learning how to analyze fantasy specifically. That is not what I want to do in this first month. I think it's important to have a basis first. And what have I learned now? So I've been reading How to Read Literature Like a Professor by Thomas. I always forget his name. I don't know why, but it's there, okay? It's here. And the first thing that he says is everything is a quest. So in most stories, you always have a quest of some sort. And when you have a quest, you have usually 5 elements. The quest, a place to go, a starter reason for you to go there, the obstacles, and then the real reason for why you want to go. And if this is not one of the perfect ways to analyze fantasy, I don't know what is, because in literally every single fantasy story, we have a quest. We have a quest of some sort. Even if the fantasy story, even if the plot or the main plot point is not a quest, you always have a freaking quest. So for example, the most basic examples, you have Lord of the Rings, Eragon, or for example, even Kings of the Wild. It's so evident that there is a quest and the quest is the main plot, but there are books that you don't usually have that quest structure. And for example, one of the books that I absolutely love is The Bone Witch by Irene Shepeko, and you don't really have a quest. Tia doesn't start with a quest. She doesn't start, I have to go to this place. No, she becomes a Dark Ashes, so she has to learn how to navigate all of that and how to control her powers. But then she starts to learn that, okay, the association that controls all of the ashes and manages everything is hiding some sort of things, and I need to figure out why. That's a quest. That is literally a quest, because she has to go somewhere to find all of the clues. She has a reason to go there. She has multiple obstacles on the way, and then you actually find out the real reason why she wants to go, and it's because she wants to live. Basically, she just wants to live, because in this world, Dark Asha, they tend to die a lot sooner because of the runes that they use. They are dark runes, so they consume a lot of vital force, a lot of life, and that's why they usually tend to die sooner. So she doesn't want to die soon, and she figures out, like, okay, these elders are hiding something about Dark Asha, about my power specifically, and I need to know because I want to live. So even if the main story doesn't really have a quest, everything is a quest. It is just a quest. You can resume almost any book, not just fantasy, to a simple quest, and I absolutely love that. The second thing that he teaches us is nice to eat with you. So what he means by this is, in every book you almost have a communion setting. So you're always eating with someone, you always have an event, a dine, or a lunch, anything that involves eating, you always have a scene like that. And the reason why, it's because we love eating. We as people, we love eating, we love being with the people that we love while we're eating. That's just who we are as people, especially here in Portugal. If you have any sort of event, you're always going to have one van that sells food, because we just love food. We love eating with the people that we love. We love eating with our family, with our friends. It is just a time where we can all be together and form new memories, and that is the same thing applied to books. So for example, whenever we have stories, and I can remember a Game of Thrones at the top of my head, where sometimes people, they have food on the table, but they don't usually eat. And that means that they do not trust each other, because you usually only eat with people that you feel comfortable with, that you want to spend time with. And you also see that in Game of Thrones. You see both ways, where they just don't really eat. They're just pick eating. They're just more talking, because it's more of like a confrontation, or there's a lot of tension involved. So this view of eating is actually so freaking cool, because I've never noticed that before, and I never understood why deeply we have these scenes where it involves food or events, like I said, because now it's just so much more clear, where it does make sense, because we love, as people, like I said, we love eating with people that we love. So whenever there is a scene written of food in a book, trust, it means a lot more than you think, because if you're eating comfortably and if the character is eating just fine, it means that they are comfortable where they're at. It means they're comfortable with the people that they are around with. And if they're peak eating or not really eating at all, then you can tell that there is a lot of tension involved. Third aspect that I've learned is nice to eat you, which involves vampires. Now, I'm not really a vampire reader. I don't really like vampires. I don't find them that fascinating, but they are extremely important in our literature. And what usually vampires entails is always an older male. He's very, very old. And then on the other side, you always have a young woman that she's so innocent, she's so pure. You always have this type of dynamic. Even if the older man is not really a vampire, you can still have this analogy and this metaphor for example, romance where there's a big age gap, where you can tell that the man is much more experienced. He knows what he's doing. He's manipulating the young woman. So that is also kind of a relationship that resembles to vampires. But in most cases, whenever you're using vampires in fiction, it's not just because you want to use vampires. Of course, you do have books where vampires, they're just vampires. But in most books, they are not. They usually represent manipulation, exploitation of someone, doing whatever you want to get what you want. You usually don't think about the other person. You don't care that this is an innocent young woman. You will destroy her if you need to, and that is what vampires essentially do. They exploit you, and that is the biggest theme around vampires. It's exploitation in its many forms. It doesn't need to involve just, for sexual relationships, because it always also tends to be a virgin female, okay? Because that was the idea of innocence and pureness back then. But now, of course, you do have different forms of innocence and purity, and you also have a lot of different forms of exploitation of sorts. So whenever you see vampires in a book, trust me, they always mean more than what it seems. Now, the next rule is not really important because if it's a square, it's a sonnet. This applies to poems, so I'm not really going into detail, but usually when you can tell it's kind of a square, or the format is a square basically, where you have the same number of syllables and lines, etc., you can tell that it is a sonnet. But because I am studying fantasy, I didn't really pay too much attention to this part. I know, maybe I should have. I don't think so. I really don't think so, because I'm not really a poetry girly. If I do ever read poetry, and if I do ever want to dabble into that world, then I will go back to this. But for now, it's out. And finally, the last thing that I've learned for now is, when in doubt, it comes from Shakespeare. Now, we all know that Shakespeare has had such a big influence in our literature, in so many books, and even in fantasy books. So whenever you're in doubt, whenever you read something and you're like, I think this comes from somewhere, I remember this from somewhere, I don't know where it was, Shakespeare. It's probably Shakespeare, Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, all of that has had such great influence in our day-to-day basis now. And the reason why this has happened, it's because it has great stories, great characters, great quotes. We have heard so many Shakespeare quotes that right now they're all ingrained into our heads, in our society in general, in my opinion. And Shakespeare, if you really, really look closely, it's everywhere. Shakespeare is everywhere. We cannot escape from him. So, like I said, whenever you feel like you read something that is very, very familiar to you, but you don't really know where it comes from, chances are it does come from some play of Shakespeare. That's just how it is. That is literally just how it is. And honestly, I would dream to be such as influential as Shakespeare, because he has shaped the entirety of literature. Even in today's day and age, whenever you have the word Shakespeare, it's instantly a bestseller, or people are just like, add to cart and buy. Even me, okay? I don't add to cart and buy, but I'm like, I'm keeping an eye on you, and you might go to my TBR because it's Shakespeare. Who doesn't like Shakespeare? And I'm pretty sure once I actually start reading Shakespeare, because that's going to happen one day, I'm going to fall in love with him, and then I'm going to have to read fantasy books totally inspired by Shakespeare. I just know that's going to happen. So yeah, this is what I've learned for now, just these 5 things, and I'm having so much fun. It is so cool to see how fantasy is so much similar to other literature than I thought it was, because, people usually say that fantasy isn't real literature, but they are completely wrong, because fantasy has so many of these elements that I've talked about. It has the eating scene, it has vampires, it also has everything as a quest, which is, in my opinion, the most important thing. And also, it even has some inspirations from Shakespeare, which proves that fantasy is actual literature. So for you people that say that fantasy is not literature, you're wrong, okay? You are wrong, because I can definitely see all of these things in fantasy books, and it's just so much fun, okay? It's just so much fun. I'm loving this experience so much. I know it's just the first week, and you tend to be much more motivated when you start, and that does happen to me a lot, because I tend to get bored of things. I don't know why I do this, but whenever I start a project, when it takes too long, I do tend to get bored, but I really, really hope that I don't get bored of this, because fantasy is the love of my life. I really love fantasy. It's what brought me back to reading, and I can't really read anything else, because where's the world building? Where's the world building? Like thrillers, okay, they're fun, but it's just boring, it just tends to be boring. I just love different worlds and different cultures and all of the epic tropes. I just absolutely love that, and I cannot wait to go and study that part. So that's why I have to keep myself motivated and grounded, because that will eventually come. So I will continue reading this book. It's only 10 chapters. I don't know if I mentioned that, because the rest is not that important. These first 10 chapters are the most important ones. So I read 5 chapters, so I'm going to read now the next 5, and I will give you guys another update pretty soon. So I'm here, guys, to give you another update on how I'm studying fantasy. And the last time I ended with, when in doubt, it's always from Shakespeare. And the next point and the next chapter is actually a continuation from that, because or the Bible. That's what he says. It's either from Shakespeare or the Bible, which is so true because we have so many parallels. And I think one of the most obvious series is Narnia. I haven't read it, and I think I've only watched the movie once, but I haven't read the books. But I know it is deeply influenced by the Bible. We all know that Arslan, I think that's his name, the lion. Okay, the lion represents Jesus Christ. So now you know, whenever you see something that seems familiar, it's either from Shakespeare or the Bible. And afterwards, the author talks about the tale of Hansel and Gretel, where he talks about how we love that story and how we have so many parallels to it because we love reading a story about lost children that are so far away from home. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they're going. They are just completely lost. And you can do so much with just that aspect that so many stories have that inspiration. I think one of them, I think it's really, really recent. There is a horror book that involves the tale of Baba Yaga as well as Hansel and Gretel, I think. I don't know what the name is. It's in the tip of my tongue, but I cannot remember it, so I'm going to put an image here. But it's this book, okay? I think this book does have a lot of Hansel and Gretel into it, so we can tell that it does have a lot of influence, and it doesn't have to be so obvious. It's just the feeling of having lost children in the woods, not knowing what they're doing, not knowing where their home is, feeling so distraught and just having to find a way to go back home. And it's something so relatable to us because I think we've all felt this way at some certain point, even if we haven't, of course, gotten actually lost from our home. But sometimes we do feel lost in our own lives and we don't really know where to go or where we should go, what should we do. And in Hansel and Gretel, that is the exact same feeling that we have. And obviously, the author had to mention Greek mythology because Greek mythology, it is so well known and so many people write about it. One of the most famous ones, the Percy Jackson series. You have so many fantasy books that take inspiration from Greek mythology. It's actually insane. And I'm going to say a controversial statement here. I don't really care for Greek mythology at all. I know. The mythology that I do like the most is Celtic mythology, and that is only because my boyfriend absolutely loves it. So I know so much to the point where I actually like it now, and I actually prefer Celtic mythology to Greek mythology. I don't know, it's just never called my name. I always thought the gods were, assholes, and they are assholes. So I just never really liked it, but I can't deny the importance that the Greek mythology does have. One example is Icarus. It's his story. Whenever we see a character that is flying too high, even if it's just a metaphor, it's just flying too high, it burns its wings, it falls down, it's a tragedy, we always connect it to Icarus, which is from the Greek mythology. It's a tale from the Greek mythology. I think right now, Epic the Musical is, trending, and that is very much Greek mythology. The Odyssey is also trending. So just all of these things, all of these tales and all of the myths, they do have a great impact in fantasy novels. So it's obviously important to me to know a little bit about Greek mythology. So maybe I will study it, but very lightly, just very, graze my eyes upon it and just a few myths because unfortunately it does have a lot of influence. And lastly, it's never just rain or snow. So what the author is talking about is the weather conditions and how we use the weather conditions to build an atmosphere in the book. Whenever we see a scene, it was pouring rain, it's never just rain. Obviously, it can be, and it can be just rain in the sense of, okay, it was raining that day, but it always brings a gloomy sense of atmosphere. It always brings something bad to it. It always brings this bad premonition that something horrible is going to happen to one of our characters, that is just going to be a horrible bad day. But the rain can also mean something nice because the rain cleans. It's water, it cleanses you. So maybe it can also mean the start of something new for our character. It can mean so many things. And obviously snow, the same exact thing. The snow is beautiful, but it's also catastrophic because it ruins so many lives, especially the people who are farmers. It ruins all of their crops. So it's beautiful, but also very destructive. It's not an easy time to go through. Whenever we read about fantasy, for example, I'm reading Game of Thrones, winter is awful, okay? In Winterfell, I don't want to say they live miserable lives because they are so used to it, but it is miserable. They don't have a lot of crops there. They have to get the crops from somewhere else because it is so cold. But is it beautiful? Yes, it is. So whenever you read about any type of weather, it was sunny, it was rainy, it was foggy, just know that it is so much more than that. And so we've reached the end of this first episode of Becoming a Fantasy Expert in 6 months. This was everything that I've learned this first week, which I am so excited, okay? I'm still very excited. I'm still very, very pumped to learn everything because all of these tips that this author gave are so good because they are actually true. Like, I can actually think and see, yeah, it is from Shakespeare, or it's from the Bible. Greek mythology has a lot of impact, or even the weather, the way that we eat, how we eat around people, or everything is a quest. All of these things I just know are going to be so useful when I'm studying actual fantasy and fantasy books, because now I actually know what to look for, which is so much fun. And I cannot say it enough, okay? I'm just so excited because I actually feel like I'm a scholar. I actually feel like I'm in this dark academia world where I'm going to learn and become an expert at this field, which, okay, it makes me proud, okay? It makes me proud. It makes my heart pump faster. I am so here for it. I'm still so motivated. So if you're also motivated, please continue studying. It is so much fun. You can follow my plan. Like I said, it is so much fun. Trust me. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye!